Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you were with us for the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for you today. And Jim, we don't see it very often, especially in Washington, but once in a while you get out to states and you're sitting in one of them right now where you have competent leadership that basically does what people want from the government. Protect your rights, take care of your money, your tax dollars like it was your own, and leave us the heck alone. That's pretty much how I look at government. And you're in Iowa for the next couple days here, covering the lead up to the caucuses. But yesterday was the State of the State address in Iowa, and Governor Kim Reynolds delivering some really good financial news. The state of Iowa will end the 2023 fiscal year with a balance of $1.83 billion in the black in the general fund, $902 million in reserve funds, and $2.74 billion in the taxpayer relief fund. Meanwhile, if you look at some of these other states that the media loves so much, not so good on the fiscal front. California, which had a nearly $100 billion surplus just a couple years ago, has morphed into a projected deficit as high as $68 billion over 2 years. Maryland lawmakers have a $761 million deficit in the next fiscal year, and it could be north of $2.5 billion by 2029 because they can't stop spending over there. Massachusetts, New York, all these other states dealing with a ton of red ink, some of them unexpectedly large amounts of red ink due to the migrants they've got to pay for now. But when it comes to competent leadership, and we say this all the time, Republicans in Washington, not a good track record, not good at all. But in some of these states, you're seeing the fruits of people who actually take that responsibility seriously on fiscal discipline.
Greg, I'm sure you and listeners will be shocked to learn that if you want to do really good reporting on the ground in a state capital, it requires drinking an enormous amount of beer. Or at least that was my plan last night. I had a few with a couple of National Review readers in the area. But also I talked to a guy who very plugged in the state capitol, right of center, and was kind of, making the argument, hey, we're doing really good stuff out here, and it really hasn't gotten the attention that some other states do. And you just run through the numbers there. The state of Iowa is basically sitting on roughly $5 billion in extra money. Of a surplus of those three different groups, the general fund, the reserve funds, and the taxpayer relief fund. And as a result of that, they can cut taxes. They are expected to cut taxes this session. Governor Kim Reynolds has said she wants to eliminate the income tax entirely to make Iowa one of those no income tax states. Now, whether they'll be able to do that by the end of her time in government is, it's going to be a gradual process. You're going to see it probably come down a little bit, either each, if not each year, each cycle. But, it is easier when you are sitting on these kinds of funds. And at least the current plan is to not increase the state sales tax or any other state taxes to cover this reduction in the income tax. Whether they'll get to manage this or whether it just ends up in being another solid reduction in state income taxes, either way, it's good. I look at that and I'm like, okay, this is a demonstration of what these, governors can do when they put their minds to it. And also being thrifty and being clear and saving up money for that rainy day, as opposed to just assuming that COVID funding from the federal government was just going to go on forever, which appears to be the philosophy at work in a whole bunch of these other state capitals, most of which were run by Democrats. And I think that, just this fundamental philosophy here, when Democrats see money come in, their instinct is to spend it. Their instinct is to, let's send this out the door in one of the causes we believe in as quickly as possible, and we'll worry about it, the long-term consequences or whether people get used to this spending some other day. We'll, if Washington tries to cut off the funds, we'll claim it's emergency and see if they keep giving us. California is bad, Maryland's bad, Massachusetts is bad, New York is bad. Look, this is what happens when this philosophy is at work. Good for you, Iowa. The work is not done, but things, it looks like things are heading in a very good direction. These Democrat-run states up in the Northeast and out in California, these are the consequences of the political decisions you've made that not only assumed that federal funding was going to go on, but that there'd never be any type of economic slowdown or reduction in state tax revenues. Well, lo and behold, the business cycle isn't always smooth sailing. And, you get a burst, and sometimes the following year it goes down a bit. And if you are budgeting tax dollars coming in at the same rate, you find yourself in trouble.
Exactly right. And Kim Reynolds in Iowa, and she's not the only one, understand how cutting taxes actually increase revenue. You know, supply siders got pilloried for years because there were deficits, but it wasn't because revenues were going down as a result of tax cuts. DeSantis mentioned this at some town hall. They're all kind of run together now a couple of weeks ago, where lowering taxes attracts new businesses. And yes, they pay a lower tax rate, but they're doing it in your state. And they're paying money into your treasury because they're getting a better deal there as opposed to staying wherever they were at a much worse deal. So people don't understand, particularly on the left, and maybe they do understand in the media, but they don't want the public to know that cutting taxes actually boosts revenue. It's always, or almost always, a spending problem rather than a revenue problem. That's why they're constantly looking for handouts from the feds like you were talking about, because they can't get a handle on their own spending discipline. Jim, you are in Iowa. Hopefully you got a restful sleep in your hotel there. But a lot of people struggle with getting not only enough hours of sleep, but quality sleep. And now that a new year's here, make a resolution to get better sleep. And one of the ways you can do that is through Magnesium Breakthrough by BioOptimizers. Right now you can get 10% off any order at biooptimizers.com/martini and use the promo code martini. Magnesium Breakthrough is the best because it doesn't just give you the 1 to 2 forms of magnesium that most other supplements do. Magnesium Breakthrough contains all 7 forms of magnesium designed to help calm your mind and help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. In addition to experiencing that sleep, Magnesium Breakthrough also helps improve digestion, supports muscle recovery, and supports healthy bone density. So do yourself a favor and make Magnesium Breakthrough part of your daily routine this year so you can get the vitality you need to conquer your dreams. Go to biooptimizers.com/martini and enter the promo code martini to get 10% off any order. Again, that's biooptimizers.com/martini. biooptimizers.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now. And the Lloyd Austin saga has taken a few different turns since Scott Bertram and I talked about it on Monday. We now know that the surgery, the supposedly elective surgery that Lloyd Austin had back in December, was following a diagnosis of prostate cancer. The surgery, by all accounts, initially was successful, but then he had inflammation and severe pain on New Year's Day, which led to a number of days in the ICU. He's apparently doing better, but I'm not sure he's out of the hospital yet. Meanwhile, not only did we find out the White House and Joe Biden and other Pentagon officials didn't know about the time Austin spent in the ICU, the president didn't know until the last day or two that Austin even had the cancer diagnosis. And so as a result, heads are kind of spinning at the White House and at the Pentagon about how this could happen. And so we're going to act like kindergarten now because we have to. AP with the story, the White House chief of staff on Tuesday ordered cabinet heads to notify his office if they ever can't perform their duties. Jeff Zients, in a memo to cabinet secretaries, directed that they send the White House any existing procedures for delegating authority in the event of incapacitation or loss of communication by Friday. So, Jim, this is less than like office work 101 to let people know that you can't do your job. I mean, our prayers are with the secretary. We hope that he recovers from this setback and that he's cancer-free very, very soon, if not already, following the surgery. But I mean, this is a guy who's been in the chain of command for decades. You expect to have some sort of responsibility to someone above you or someone below you when you step away. And, we also had the 2 months or whatever it was that nobody realized Pete Buttigieg wasn't working a couple of years ago. Shouldn't be that hard to say, you know what, I'm going to be out. I've just had this setback. I'm in the ICU. I have somebody say, this guy can't do his job right now. This isn't rocket science, but apparently we have to do this.
You know, Greg, first of all, I feel a lot better if I'm a little slack on putting out my out of the office emails. Because really, I'm in the ICU. Sounds like the sort of thing you should let people. In fact, if you look closely at that memo, just kind of handwritten at the bottom, it says, P.S. Is there anyone else who's currently in an intensive care unit who forgot to tell us? Anybody else? Anybody at all? Just let us know. It does look kind of ridiculous they have to do this. It's very easy to understand why Austin wasn't eager to talk about it. Guys can be very touchy and sensitive about things going on down there. And I think we all sympathize. But I think, you have to say, I have a, health matter that I'm attending to that's, requires, if not immediate attention. And by the way, you mentioned it was referred to as elective. In medical circles, elective surgery simply means it is planned or scheduled. It means it is not like rushed into the emergency room or something like that. I think people hear the term elective and they think non-essential or optional, cosmetic or minor or something like that. Doesn't necessarily mean those things. I thought about it yesterday and I realized, I wonder if people think of elective courses in college, things that are not required for your course requirements of graduation. In medical service, all it means is that this thing was planned. Now, it can be planned and it can still be pretty darn serious, and I think we would agree anything relating to cancer is pretty darn serious. And we all hope he makes a quick recovery. We sympathize, but that doesn't get him off the hook for not telling anyone, both for the original surgery, and again, Mr. President, I'm having surgery done. They found something down there and they have to take it out. I know it's uncomfortable, but you gotta do that. And there's really just no excuse for not telling the president, and then not telling the deputy initially why she was having his duties transferred to her. Doesn't make any sense. The degree to which no one else in there knew that he was in the hospital, it still remains inexcusable. And the administration looks silly putting out this memo. You'd figure this would be standard operating procedure. This is the sort of, let us know if you're not going to be here or unable to perform your duties. Just an embarrassment to this administration and a demonstration that, when you don't see the government, you assume that things are running the way they should. And clearly they aren't. And we don't see the president more than once a day. We don't see Secretary Austin in a normal week more than once or twice a week. And it turns out the strong suggestion of this is that, even with ongoing military conflicts in the Middle East, Israel and Hamas, attacks against our guys in Iraq and Syria, attacks against shipping and in the Red Sea and against our naval ships in that area, even with all this, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of talking going on amongst the Biden cabinet. And that's really worrisome. It makes you wonder if this, whole administration is sort of running on autopilot and, the far left hand doesn't know what the other left hand is doing.
Two thoughts here. Maybe Biden did want to know, but remember those couple of times in public you couldn't remember Austin's name?
Yeah.
So maybe he did ask and nobody knew who he meant. The other thing is I would normally agree with being very defensive of someone's medical privacy. I feel like that would be my instinct as well. Although if I was in a position where I couldn't do my job, I would certainly tell anyone. But with Lloyd Austin, this is a guy who told every member of the military that their medical privacy didn't matter. And whatever you thought of the vaccine, there was a mandate. And if you didn't get it, regardless of what you thought with your medical condition, you were going to get fired from the military. So for him to play that card when he acted in a very different way with rank and file members of the armed forces, less sympathy than I otherwise would have.
Yeah. If you want the power and responsibility that comes from being the Secretary of Defense, you have to give up a certain amount of your privacy. And I think at minimum, even if you don't want to go into the exact details of every last aspect of it, if you just want to, just I'm going to be in the hospital, people will understand. People will say, oh my God, I hope everything's okay. And that's fine. I have to transfer my duties. Okay, got it. No problem. Didn't do it here. And there's just no way to justify and saying, oh, okay, this is not that big a deal.
All right, let's talk about 4Patriots and their fantastic products. You go to the new website, 4patriots.com/martini, and they've got phenomenal deals over there. You can get the Solar Go Fridge, which keeps things cold without ice. They've also got the Starfire Camp Stove. Buy 3 and get 1 free. But don't forget about perhaps their signature item, the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. We've just had major storms along the East Coast. If it had been quite a bit colder, it would have been a monster snowstorm. Jim, you've talked about how cold it is out there in Iowa. They're supposed to get belted, or at least the Midwest is in different places later this week. Be ready against these winter storms. You just don't know when your power is going to go out. The solar generator charges more devices for longer in a blackout with double the capacity and more peak power than ever before. So visit 4patriots.com/martini to see this week's discounts and deals before they are gone and get free shipping on orders over $97. Save more and get peace of mind now by going to the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And there are a lot of people who are running for president this year and who have run for president. Some of them have dropped out. It took him a long time to get the memo that maybe this wasn't such a great idea. We've talked about people like Asa Hutchinson and people at the bottom of the Republican field who struggled, if they made it at all, even onto the first debate stage. Now we're down to just a handful. Over on the Democratic side, it's pretty much a victory lap for Joe Biden anyway. RFK Jr. is now running as an independent, was never that big of a threat anyway. Marianne Williamson is basically on the side of a milk carton somewhere. Nobody knows where she is. And the other person running is Dean Phillips, the Minnesota congressman who decided kind of late in the game to take a stab at the Democratic nomination. And it's not going well. You had a post over at the Corner yesterday about Dean Phillips hosting an event called Government Repair Truck Coffee Conversations. And literally, this was in Manchester, New Hampshire.
Before we go any further, Greg, isn't that the clunkiest name for an event?
Yeah, it's terrible. It doesn't even make sense.
Coffee with Dean, right? Fine. Yeah, apparently it was Dean. Okay, yes. So we should also point out the plan was this was outdoors. It was by a truck. I guess he had a little coffee maker there by the truck. And so I believe the temperature in New Hampshire yesterday in Manchester was 23 degrees. Now, here in Iowa, where it's 10, that looks pretty warm and balmy. But an outdoor event when the temperature is 20, not less than ideal, let's just say.
Normally, I mean, it's kind of typical for winters in the north. But yeah, if you want to get a bigger crowd, it's better to do it inside. Jim, I remember when Sam Brownback was running in 2008, and I would cringe when I see that, like, you got all the dozens and maybe a couple hundred chairs set up and like 5 people would show up. No one came to talk to Dean Phillips yesterday at the Manchester Doubletree Hotel, and his quote was, "Sometimes if you build it, they don't come," which is obviously a reference to Field of Dreams and flipping that quote around. But when literally no one comes to your event, and I realize in New Hampshire, presidential candidates, you can bump into them around every corner, and so it's not that special of an event. But when you get 0, that should be a time for some reflection.
It's not a matter of not liking Dean Phillips. I'm not a huge fan of him, but I just kind of, and some people thought yesterday's Corner post was kind of mean-spirited. Look, you could see the scenario where, okay, there are a lot of Democrats who think Biden is too old and, are looking for another option. And RFK Jr. jumped off to run as an independent after peaking at about, 15, 20% in most polls. I'm a Minnesota congressman. Why not me? And Phillips jumped in, but it was really no indication that anybody in the Democratic Party was clamoring for him. CNN did a poll of New Hampshire, and he came in at 7% in the Democratic primary. I guess all 7% were busy yesterday, which is why they did not show up for this event. But it's just not going to happen for you, pal. And I'm not a bad guy for pointing this out. And we've seen, Asa Hutchinson speaking to a room of 5 people. We've seen Mike Pence at a storefront, and a very bored-looking, maybe a dozen people are standing there in front of him. This guy was vice president for 4 years, not that long ago. And I laid out this in the tail end of today's Morning Jolt. That, there are a lot of people who really want to be president of the United States. The number of people who run increases or seems to increase most cycles. We're a little bit lower this time than 2016 and 2020, but still a lot of candidates. And I feel like saying to not just the Dean Phillips, but the Doug Burgums and Asa Hutchinsons and all these folks running, look, you're not that well known. I know you think America is calling you. They actually just want to check in about your extended warranty on your car. You're not that, people are not clamoring for you. And there's just a real, threshold you have to rise to get taken seriously as a presidential candidate. And none of these guys have done this. And the fact that you can't get people to come out and see you is an indicator of this. And these guys no, this is a real campaign, and we're going to, and then I just kind of looked at that. I was like, okay, Dean Phillips, this is a sign. Yes, I pointed out that it was outdoors, and that's, less than ideal. But I also pointed out it's downtown Manchester 2 weeks before the primary. Right, this is the circumstance you'd figure passersby would gather just to see what's going on. You're giving away coffee, and you couldn't do it. You're giving away hot coffee on a cold day, and nobody wanted to listen to you. All right, that's a sign. It's a sign. It's time to pack it up. Yes, I think the DNC has done Dean Phillips dirty. I think it's ridiculous that the Florida Democratic Party is like, yeah, we're just not having a primary this year. I get all that, but Dean Phillips, America is not calling you to become president of the United States. It's not going to happen this year. If you want to be president someday, you have to go out and do more things that turn people's heads and notice you, and then maybe you have a shot at being president someday. And I am not the bad guy for pointing that out.
Maybe you had lousy coffee. You'd think people would just show up, grab the cup, nod a couple times, and go, "Oh my gosh, I forgot I had an appointment that I have to get to."
Did he set it up like right in front of a Starbucks or something? And people are like, your stuff looks kind of cheap. I'm going to get a mocha espresso or something.
I don't know. The only entertaining thing about the Dean Phillips campaign has been watching the former allies in the Lincoln Project snipe at each other because Steve Schmidt is a honcho in the Phillips campaign.
Greg, you're telling me that, a presidential campaign advised by the guys in the Lincoln Project isn't going anywhere? Steve Schmidt did not lead this guy to the presidency? By the way, can we also point out that, like, as much as I'm enjoying, some would say kicking Dean Phillips when he's down, way to go, campaign advance team. Usually you know a bunch of people, your neighbors, your friends say, hey, we're doing this thing. Can I trouble you to show up? Look, maybe everybody looked at the temperature and said, nah, it's all right, I'm not doing it. But usually you can just get like a handful of people.
Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah, Rick Wilson, who's still at the Lincoln Project, has been basically considering Steve Schmidt a traitor because according to Republican strategist Rick Wilson, any vote that's not for Joe Biden is a vote against our democracy. So it's good to see everybody being real honest and truthful and not grifting at all on all sides of this whole thing.
Isn't it terrible when one guy's grift gets in the way of the other guy's grift?
It's very complicated. Gets cluttered and crowded in that game.
No, I need the summer home more.
Oh, too much fun. Jim, have a good day. Stay warm. We'll talk about the debate and a whole bunch of other stuff tomorrow. See you then.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Do subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch if you don't already, and tell some friends about us as well. We'd love to have them with us. Thank you also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Wednesday and join us again on Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.